Summary of Part 1. A struggling single dad saved a woman from a car crash. He had no idea she was a billionaire. Liam Carter, a hard-working single father and mechanic, lives a quiet life in a small town with his daughter, Emma. One stormy night, fate intervenes. He rescues a stranded woman from a near-fatal car crash, unaware that she is Isabel Harrington, a billionaire businesswoman. Stranded due to the storm, Isabel spends the night at Liam's home, experiencing a warmth and simplicity she hasn't felt in years. Over time, an undeniable connection forms between them. Two people from different worlds, drawn together by something deeper than circumstance. But love is never that simple. Isabel's high-profile life and corporate responsibilities clash with Liam's quiet, grounded world. When her father, Henry Harrington, pressures her to return to New York, Isabel makes the painful decision to leave, believing that Liam and Emma deserve something more stable than what she can offer. Liam, heartbroken but unwilling to hold onto someone who doesn't want to stay, buries himself in work and raising Emma. Time passes and both try to move forward, but neither truly forgets until fate brings them back together. What happens when the one you let go returns? Can love bridge the gap between two vastly different lives? If you haven't followed Part 1 yet, make sure to watch it first at the link pinned in the comments below. You won't want to miss the beginning of this unforgettable love story. And this is where Part 2 begins. If you've been following this story and can't wait to see what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support helps bring more heartfelt, inspiring stories like this to life. Now let's dive into Part 2, when love becomes a choice. The hum of the engine filled the garage, steady and familiar, as Liam Carter worked under the hood of an old Chevy. The scent of motor oil clung to the air, mixing with the faint trace of rain drifting in from outside. It was late afternoon, the sky a dull shade of grey, threatening another downpour. He barely noticed. These days, Liam found comfort in the predictable rhythm of his work, the way his hands moved automatically, tightening bolts, adjusting cables. It was a distraction, a way to keep his mind occupied so that certain thoughts wouldn't creep in, but they always did. He wiped his hands on a rag and glanced toward the small office in the corner of the garage. Inside, in the top drawer of his desk, lay a letter he hadn't touched in 6 months. Isabel's letter. He knew every word by heart, though he had never read it more than once. Some people leave because they want to. Others leave because they think they have to. I wonder which one you were. The words echoed in his mind, as they had too many times before. The truth was he hadn't left. He had stayed exactly where he was, exactly as he had always been. It was she who had walked away. And yet, somehow, he was the one who felt like he had lost something. Maybe because deep down, he had known that if he had just said something that night, anything at all, things might have been different, but he hadn't. A gust of wind rattled the garage doors, pulling him from his thoughts. A moment later, the sound of tires crunching against gravel reached his ears. He turned, expecting to see a customer, but the car that pulled up wasn't familiar. A sleek, dark sedan, expensive but not flashy, the kind of car that didn't belong in a place like this. A man stepped out, mid-40s, well-dressed, but with the kind of presence that suggested he wasn't just some businessman. His movements were deliberate, his gaze sharp as he looked around before settling on Liam. "You Carter?" the man asked, his voice even, unreadable. Liam wiped his hands once more before nodding. "Yeah, something I can help you with." The man reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. Plain white, nothing remarkable about it, except for the way Liam's chest tightened the moment he saw the handwriting on the front. "I was asked to deliver this," the man said simply. No response necessary. Liam took the envelope without a word. It felt too light, almost fragile, as if whatever was inside would vanish if he held it too tightly. He knew he should wait, should take it inside, open it when he was alone, but his fingers had already begun to tear at the seal before he could stop himself. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Just one line. "I hope you're doing well. New York is having a rainstorm just like that night." That was it. No questions, no expectations, just a simple passing thought. Liam exhaled, the tension in his shoulders tightening rather than easing. He looked up at the man, who was already turning back toward his car. "Who gave this to you?" The man didn't answer right away. He simply opened the driver's side door and paused. "Does it matter?" Then he got in, and before Liam could say anything else, the car pulled away, leaving only the quiet hum of the rain beginning to fall. Liam stood there for a long time, staring at the letter in his hands, feeling the weight of something he couldn't quite name pressing down on him. The rainstorm in New York. He had spent 6 months trying to convince himself that he had done the right thing by letting her go. So, why did it feel like she had just opened a door he wasn't sure he could keep closed? The city hummed beneath Isabel Harrington's penthouse, a restless rhythm of lights and movement, stretching beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. New York had always been like this, alive, constant, demanding. For most of her life she had thrived in that energy, drawing from its pulse, shaping her world around its expectations. But tonight, as she sat alone in the dim glow of her study, she felt detached from it all. A file lay open in front of her, numbers and projections printed in sharp ink. A proposed merger, one that should have demanded her full attention. But her mind kept drifting, her gaze shifting to the side of her desk where a small envelope rested, Liam's letter. Or at least the one she had sent him. She had told herself it didn't matter whether he responded. She had even convinced herself it was enough to send it, to let him know she hadn't forgotten. But now, days later, she wondered if she had expected too much. A soft chime broke the silence as her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, recognizing the number instantly. Miles Henderson, one of her most trusted financial advisors. He wouldn't be calling unless something required her immediate attention. She answered on the second ring. "Miles, there's something you should see." His voice came through, steady but edged with something unusual. Concern. That wasn't like him. She frowned, closing the merger file and straightening in her chair. "What is it?" "I ran a background check on Carter's auto. Routine, like you asked." Isabel's fingers tightened slightly against the armrest. She had asked for information, yes, but only out of curiosity, not because she intended to interfere. At least that was what she had told herself. "There's been a financial hold on his garage's expansion," Miles continued. "Some contract, delays, supply chain issues. He's in a rough spot. If he can't finalize the deal soon, the bank might step in." She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to stay composed. It shouldn't have mattered. Liam was strong, independent. He had survived worse. He wouldn't want her help, and yet the thought of him struggling, of him losing the place he had built with his own hands, settled into her chest like a weight. She couldn't ignore. "Miles," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "if this were any other business, what would you suggest?" He was silent for a moment, then replied, "An investor or a strategic partnership, something that would give him leverage without making him feel like he was taking a handout." Investor, partnership. Those words were familiar, logical. They belonged to her world, not his. And yet they sparked an idea. "What if I could arrange an opportunity?" she asked, her mind already moving ahead. Miles hesitated. "What kind of opportunity?" "A chance for him to make the money himself, on his terms." She reached for another file on her desk, flipping it open to a set of invitations she had yet to review. Among them was a sleek black envelope embossed with silver script, an exclusive auto industry event, invitation only, attended by top manufacturers and private collectors. Deals worth millions were brokered there. Liam would never accept her money, but an opportunity, a chance to prove himself, that was something he might actually consider. "Miles," she said, standing and moving toward the window, "get in touch with the event coordinator. Make sure there's a spot for Liam Carter." There was a brief pause before he responded. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" She let out a breath, eyes scanning the skyline, searching for something she couldn't quite name. "No," she admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway, because if there was one thing she knew about Liam Carter, it was this: he never took anything he hadn't earned. And maybe, just maybe, this was her way of giving him something without taking away his pride. The next morning, Isabel stepped into her office earlier than usual, the scent of freshly brewed coffee barely masking the tension that had settled in her chest overnight. She had made up her mind, but that didn't mean she wasn't bracing herself for resistance. Liam was a man who valued his independence more than anything. He had already walked away once, rather than take something he didn't believe he had earned. If she approached this the wrong way, he would see it as another attempt to save him, and he would push her away again. She wouldn't let that happen. Taking a breath, she dialed the number Miles had secured for her, one of the senior coordinators at the industry event. The line rang twice before a polished voice answered. "Ms. Harrington, what a pleasant surprise." She kept her tone measured. "I have a request." Anything. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I need an additional entry for the exhibition. A small-town mechanic with an exceptional reputation." There was a slight pause before the man responded. "Ms. Harrington, you know this event is exclusive, and you know that I'm one of your largest investors," she interjected smoothly. "If I want someone there, he'll be there." Silence. Then a resigned chuckle. "Understood. I'll have the paperwork ready by this afternoon." She ended the call and sat back in her chair, the victory feeling oddly hollow. Because the hardest part wasn't getting Liam an invitation. The hardest part would be convincing him to take it. She picked up her phone again, this time dialing a number she hadn't called in months. It rang. Once, twice, then, finally, Carter. His voice was rough, familiar, sending something unsteady through her chest. She hesitated for only a moment. "Liam." A pause. Then, guardedly, "Isabel." It had been too long since she had last heard him say her name, and yet it felt like no time had passed at all. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. "I have something for you." Another pause. "Is that so?" "Yes, an opportunity, one that could help your garage." His exhale was sharp. "Isabel, just listen," she cut in, knowing he was already preparing to refuse. "It's not charity, it's a business opportunity. There's an auto event in New York, high profile, invitation only, buyers with deep pockets, collectors who pay real money for quality work. You could walk away with contracts that would solve your expansion issues without needing a loan." Silence stretched between them. Then he finally said, "And you think I belong at something like that?" She softened slightly. "I know you do." Liam let out a quiet scoff, but there was no real bite behind it. Just hesitation, uncertainty. Then, after a long moment, he said something she hadn't expected. "When is it?" A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Next week." Another pause. Then, grudgingly, "Send me the details." She did. And when she hung up the phone, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, because for the first time in 6 months, Liam Carter hadn't walked away. And that had to mean something. Liam Carter sat at his worn kitchen table, staring at the invitation in his hands, as if it might burst into flames at any moment. The thick black cardstock was smooth beneath his fingertips, embossed with silver script detailing the exclusive event in New York, an event he had no business attending. The early morning light streamed through the window, catching on the steam rising from his untouched coffee. He had spent most of the night lying awake, turning the damn invitation over in his mind, trying to find a reason, any reason, not to go. New York. He hated the city. Too crowded, too loud, too much of everything. It reminded him of all the ways he didn't fit, of the people who lived in glass towers and boardrooms, who spent their lives chasing things he'd never cared about. And Isabel. That was the real problem, wasn't it? The idea of seeing her again, standing in her world, where he would always be an outsider. He could already imagine the way people would look at him, like he didn't belong, like she didn't belong with him, because she didn't. A chair scraped against the floor, breaking his thoughts. Emma sat across from him, legs tucked under her, as she picked absently at her breakfast. She was watching him, and he knew that look. "What?" he muttered, taking a sip of his now cold coffee. She shrugged, too casual. "You're making that face." He raised a brow. "What face?" "The one where you try to pretend you're not thinking about something, but you're actually thinking about it really hard." He exhaled through his nose. "Smart kid. Too smart sometimes." Emma nudged the invitation with her fork. "So you're gonna go, right?" He frowned. "Didn't realize you were keeping track of my business deals." She rolled her eyes. "Dad, I'm 10, not 5. I know what this is." She sat up straighter. "It's a big deal, isn't it?" "Maybe," he admitted. She studied him for a long moment, then leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "You don't want to go?" Liam didn't answer. He didn't need to. Emma tilted her head, thoughtful. "Because of Isabel?" His grip tightened on the mug. He should have known she'd put the pieces together. The kid was sharp, always had been. She had met Isabel once, briefly, when she had shown up at the hospital after Emma's accident. But even in that short time, she had noticed everything. Emma poked at the invitation again. "You know, I don't think you're afraid of the city, or the event, or even the fancy people." She met his gaze, eyes too knowing for someone so young. "I think you're afraid that if you see her again, you won't be able to let her go." Liam felt something in his chest tighten, like a door slamming shut. He opened his mouth to tell her she was wrong, to say something that would end the conversation. But the words wouldn't come. Because she was right, Emma sat back satisfied. "You always tell me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing things even when you are." She pointed at the invitation. "Sounds like you should take your own advice." He huffed a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "You giving me life lessons now?" "Obviously." She grinned. "You're welcome." Liam ran a hand through his hair, staring at the damn invitation again. He had spent 6 months convincing himself that letting Isabel go had been the right thing, that she had a life, a world, a future that didn't include him. But what if she had been waiting for him to prove her wrong? He took a breath, pushing back the doubt that clawed at the edges of his thoughts. Maybe it was time to stop running. He stood, grabbing his phone and scrolling to the message Isabel had sent with the event details. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he typed a single word. "I'm coming." He hit send before he could change his mind. Across the table, Emma grinned. "Told you so." Liam regretted his decision almost immediately. Standing at the tiny regional airport, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he felt like a damn fool. He hadn't been on a plane in years, hadn't needed to be. His whole life was in that small town, in his garage, in the routine he had built for himself, and now he was flying straight into the unknown. He had barely stepped into the terminal when his phone buzzed. "Isabel, let me know when you land." She hadn't called, hadn't asked anything more, just that simple message. He exhaled slowly, running a hand over his jaw. This was a mistake. He could already feel it. But it was too late now. The flight was short, but it felt like a lifetime. By the time he stepped off the plane and into the chaos of JFK Airport, he was already second-guessing everything. Then he saw her. Isabel stood near the baggage claim, effortlessly elegant even in something as simple as dark jeans and a tailored coat. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and when her gaze met his, something unreadable flickered in her expression. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she smiled. And just like that, every excuse he had prepared, every reason he had given himself for why this wouldn't work, disappeared, because the truth was, Emma had been right all along. He hadn't been afraid of losing Isabel. He had been afraid of what would happen if he let himself have her, and now there was no turning back. Liam Carter had never felt more out of place in his life. The auto exhibition was held in one of New York's most luxurious venues, a vast ballroom with high vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and a sea of people who looked like they belonged. There, men in tailored suits and women in elegant dresses moved through the space with an ease he would never understand. Everything gleamed, the polished marble floors, the high-end cars displayed like works of art, even the glasses of champagne that waiters carried on silver trays. He exhaled, adjusting the stiff collar of the black dress shirt Isabel had arranged. Oh, for him! He had fought against it at first, insisting that he didn't need to dress up just to talk cars. But now, standing here, he realized she had been right. His usual jeans and work boots wouldn't have made it past the front entrance. T.E.'s invitation in his pocket suddenly felt heavier. He was here for one reason, to secure a deal that would save his garage. This wasn't about her, except it was, because she was here, and the second his gaze found hers across the crowded room, he knew nothing about this night was going to go as planned. Isabel Harrington stood near one of the featured vehicles, an Aston Martin with a sleek charcoal finish. She was engaged in conversation with a group of industry elites, a glass of wine resting delicately in her hand. Even from across the room, she looked effortlessly composed, like she belonged in this world in a way he never could. But the moment she saw him, something in her expression changed. For a brief second, the carefully polished facade slipped. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass, and her lips parted slightly, as if she had forgotten how to breathe. Liam wasn't sure how long they stood there, neither of them moving. The world didn't actually stop, of course. The music played on, the guests continued their conversations, the clinking of glasses and laughter filled the space. But in that instant, none of it mattered. There was only her. And the unspoken truth hanging between them. She hadn't expected him to come, and yet here he was, finally. She took a slow step forward, excusing herself from the conversation. Liam did the same, weaving through the crowd until they met in the middle of the room, standing just inches apart. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Isabel tilted her head slightly, her voice softer than he remembered. "You clean." Well," Liam smirked, though there was no real humor behind it. "Don't get used to it." Her lips twitched, as if she wanted to smile but wasn't sure if she should. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Neither was I. The words hung between them, laced with too much meaning. Isabel searched his face, as if looking for something, some hint of why he was really here, why he had agreed to step into her world after all this time. "Liam." But before she could finish, a voice interrupted. "Miss Harrington." A man in his early 50s approached, dressed in a sharp navy suit, his presence commanding enough that Liam instinctively straightened. He recognized the type, someone powerful, someone who was used to being listened to. The man's gaze flicked to Liam briefly before returning to Isabel. "I was hoping to discuss the investor proposal you mentioned last week." Isabel hesitated, glancing at Liam, then back at the man. "Of course," she said smoothly. But then, turning back to Liam, she lowered her voice. "Don't go anywhere." And just like that, she was swept away. Liam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. What the hell was he doing here? He should have left the second he had seen her, should have reminded himself that this wasn't his world, should have walked away before this night became something he couldn't undo. But he didn't leave. Instead, he walked toward one of the car displays, letting his fingers skim the polished surface of a custom-built Mustang. "That's a hell of a machine," a voice beside him commented. Liam turned to see an older gentleman, his silver hair neatly combed, his suit crisp, but not flashy. There was something familiar about him, not in the sense that Liam knew him personally, but in the way he carried himself, like a man who had worked for everything he had. Liam nodded. "It's got a solid build. The craftsmanship's impeccable." The man chuckled. "Most people in this room don't know the difference between a good build and a good brand. You, on the other hand, you know your cars. Spend enough time under the hood, you learn a thing or two." The man's eyes flickered with interest. "And what is it that you do exactly?" Liam hesitated, then extended a hand. "Liam Carter. I own Carter's Auto Repair. It's a small shop." "Carter's Auto?" The man's eyebrows lifted. "I've heard of it. You specialize in restorations, right?" Liam blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah." The man smiled. "Then we should talk." And just like that, the reason he had come here, the real reason, not the one tied to Isabel, fell right into his lap. For the next 20 minutes, Liam discussed cars in a way he hadn't in a long time. The man, who introduced himself as Richard Warren, was a collector with a keen interest in classic restorations. He had been searching for a shop that could handle high-quality rebuilds, and Liam's reputation had preceded him. By the time they shook hands, Liam knew he had just secured a contract that would not only pull his garage out of financial uncertainty, but set him up for years to come. And yet, as he turned away, victory sitting heavy in his chest, his gaze instinctively searched for Isabel. He found her near the far end of the room, standing alone now, her expression unreadable. She had been watching him. Liam hesitated, then made his way toward her. When he stopped in front of her, he simply said, "I got the deal." She smiled, but there was something else in her eyes. Something softer. "I knew you would." He studied her, trying to figure out what was going on in that complicated mind of hers. "What is this, Isabel?" he finally asked. "Why did you really want me here?" Her gaze held his. "Maybe I just wanted to see if you'd come." Silence stretched between them. Then, without thinking, Liam reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away, and for the first time in a long time, he let himself hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't over. The streets of New York had never felt more unfamiliar to Liam Carter. He had spent the last several years avoiding places like this, avoiding everything that reminded him of a life he didn't belong to. Yet here he was, walking through Central Park with Isabel Harrington, the woman who had changed everything without even trying. It had been hours since the auto exhibition ended, but neither of them had suggested saying goodbye. They had wandered aimlessly, letting the hum of the city fade into the background, as if neither was quite ready to step back into reality. Now, the quiet paths of the park stretched before them, lined with the golden glow of streetlights. The air was crisp, a gentle breeze tugging at Isabel's coat, sending loose strands of her hair framing her face. Liam walked beside her, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened every time their shoulders. He brushed. "I was surprised you came tonight," Isabel admitted after a moment. Liam smirked. "So was I." She glanced at him, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Then why did you?" He hesitated. That was the question, wasn't it? He had told himself he had come for the deal, for the future of his garage, but the truth was, he could have found other ways to get what he needed. He didn't have to be here. "I don't know," he finally said. Isabel exhaled softly, nodding, as if she understood anyway. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that felt full, of things unspoken, of questions neither of them knew how to ask. A light drizzle began to fall, misting the air around them. Isabel tilted her face upward, closing her eyes briefly as the raindrops kissed her skin. Liam watched her, something tightening in his chest. "You never answered my letter," she said suddenly. The words stopped him in his tracks. He turned toward her, the weight of them pressing down harder than he expected. He had known this conversation was coming. He had prepared a dozen different answers, 100 different ways to explain why he had let her words sit unread for 6 months. But now, standing here, with the city quiet around them and the rain painting soft patterns on the pavement, only one answer felt right. "I didn't answer," he admitted, voice low, "because I was afraid." Isabel's brows lifted slightly, not with surprise but with curiosity. She didn't rush him, didn't demand an explanation. She just waited. Liam exhaled slowly, raking a hand through his damp hair. "I told myself I was doing the right thing by letting you go, that you belonged here and I belonged there." He gestured vaguely, meaning his small town, his garage, the world he had built for himself. "But the truth is, I was afraid that if I let myself want this, want you, I wouldn't be able to walk away again." The admission sat heavy in the air between them. Isabel's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak right away. She simply took a slow step closer, then another, until she was standing right in front of him. "You don't have to," she said quietly. Liam held her gaze, the warmth of her words settling deep in his chest, melting through the barriers he had spent years building. She reached up then, fingertips brushing along the edge of his jaw, tentative but sure. Liam felt himself leaning into her touch before he could stop himself. And then Isabel closed the last bit of space between them. There. Lips met softly at first, a whisper of something that had been waiting too long to be spoken. But then Liam's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened, slow and unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world. The rain fell gently around them, cool against their skin, but neither of them noticed, because in that moment nothing else existed, and for the first time in a long, long time, Liam didn't feel the need to run. The next morning, the city was alive with its usual rhythm, but for Liam Carter, everything felt different. The rain from the night before had left the streets glistening, and as he walked beside Isabel, he felt a strange lightness in his chest, like something that had been pressing on him for months had finally lifted. He hadn't planned on staying in New York longer than necessary, but after last night, he wasn't sure what his next step was. For once, he wasn't thinking about leaving. Isabel led him into a quiet cafe tucked between glass high-rises. It was small, intimate, the kind of place she probably wouldn't have chosen before, but she had chosen it now, and that meant something. They ordered coffee, and as they waited, she reached across the table, fingers brushing his. "I know we didn't talk much about last night," Liam smirked. "You mean the part where you kissed me?" A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "That part." His thumb traced over her knuckles absently. "We can talk about it if you want." She shook her head slightly. "I don't want to talk. I just want to see where this goes." Liam's chest tightened at her words, not with fear, but with something close to relief. Maybe, for once, neither of them needed all the answers. Maybe it was okay just to let this happen. The moment was interrupted when Isabel's phone vibrated against the table. She sighed, glancing at the screen before muttering, "I should have known he wouldn't let this go." Liam frowned. "Who?" She hesitated, as if considering whether to answer. Then, finally, she said, "Daniel." Liam's entire body went rigid. Daniel Montgomery, Isabel's ex-husband, a man whose name he had only heard once but had never forgotten. Liam's jaw tightened. "What does he want?" "I don't know." Isabel's expression darkened slightly. but I intend to find out." Before Liam could respond, she answered the call. "Daniel." He couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but whatever was said made her expression harden. "I'm not interested in whatever deal you're trying to sell me." A pause. Then her eyes flickered toward Liam. "Fine. 30 minutes. She ended the call and looked at Liam. "I need to meet him." Liam didn't like it. He didn't trust it. But he could tell from the set of her jaw that arguing would get him nowhere. "Then I'm coming with you," he said. Isabel hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Daniel Montgomery was already waiting when they arrived. He sat at an outdoor table. In a private terrace restaurant, his posture relaxed, his smile too easy. Everything about him screamed wealth, power, entitlement. Liam recognized his type instantly. Isabel walked ahead, and Daniel stood, his eyes flicking over her with something that looked dangerously close to possession. "You look good, Isabel," he said smoothly. She didn't return the sentiment. Instead, she took a seat opposite him, her expression unreadable. Liam stood slightly behind her, arms crossed. Daniel's gaze flickered to him, his smirk widening. "And who's this?" Isabel's voice was cool. "He's with me." Something in Daniel's jaw twitched, but he covered it with a smile. "Still surrounding yourself with people who don't belong in your world, I see." Liam stiffened, but Isabel didn't react. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked, cutting straight to the point. Daniel sighed as if put out by her lack of patience. "You know what I want. We built something together, Isabel, and now you're on the verge of throwing it away for... what? Some fleeting rebellion?" His gaze slid back to Liam. "This?" Liam clenched his fists, but Isabel remained calm. "I left because I was done being your pawn," she said evenly. "And I'm not coming back." Daniel leaned back, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake. We were a power couple, Isabel. People respected us. You think you can have the same kind of life with him?" Liam had heard enough. "I don't need to be part of your world," he said, voice steady. "And neither does she." Daniel chuckled, but there was something dark beneath it. "That's the thing, Carter. You don't get to decide that." His eyes locked onto Isabel. "You were always going to come back to me. That's how this works." Liam took a step forward, his voice dangerously low. "I'd rethink that last sentence if I were you." Daniel smirked. "You think you scare me?" He scoffed. "You're just a temporary distraction, Carter. When she's done playing in the dirt, she'll remember who she really is." Liam didn't get a chance to respond because Isabel stood. Abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone floor. "This conversation is over," she said firmly. Daniel watched her, something unreadable in his expression. Then slowly, he stood as well. "If you walk away now, Isabel, I won't be so generous next time." She didn't flinch. "I don't need your generosity." Without another word, she turned and walked away. Liam followed, his blood still, running hot, his fists still clenched. It wasn't until they were back on the street, away from Daniel's suffocating presence, that Isabel finally exhaled. "Well," she muttered, "that went about as well as I expected." Liam looked at her, studying her face. "He's not done with you." She met his gaze, something quiet but firm in her eyes. "I'm done with him." Liam wanted to believe her, but Daniel's words lingered. "You were always going to come back to me." Liam knew how this world worked, knew that men like Daniel never gave up something they thought belonged to them. And for the first time since arriving in New York, doubt started to creep in. Was he really enough to pull Isabel away from all of this? Or was he just a distraction? Exactly as Daniel had said. Liam Carter stood in his hotel room, staring at the half-packed duffel bag on the bed. His flight wasn't for another 6 hours, but he was already ready to leave. He should never have come. He had spent the past few days convincing himself that, maybe, just maybe, there was a place for him in Isabel Harrington's world. But after last night, After watching her face off against a man who still thought he owned her, he knew the truth. Daniel had been right about one thing. Liam didn't belong here. No matter what had happened between them, no matter how real it had felt when she kissed him in the rain, there would always be parts of her life that he couldn't touch. And he couldn't keep pretending otherwise. A sharp knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He knew who it was before he even opened it. Isabel stood in the hallway, eyes stormy, jaw set. She was still in the same dark dress she had worn the night before, but she looked different now, tired but determined. "You weren't even going to say goodbye," she demanded. Liam exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I figured it'd be easier this way." "For who?" Her voice was quiet but sharp, cutting straight through him. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside, letting her in. She brushed past him, arms folded tightly across her chest, as if bracing herself for a fight. She turned to face him. "You're leaving because of Daniel." Liam let out a humorless laugh. "You say that like it's not a good reason." She narrowed her eyes. "It's not." He shook his head. "Isabel, you don't get it. I watched that man talk to you like you were still his. I watched him look at me like I was nothing. And the worst part? I think he was right." Her brows furrowed. "Right about what?" Liam gestured vaguely. "All of it. That I'm just a distraction. That sooner or later you'll go back to your real life, and I'll be right where I was 6 months ago." His voice tightened. "Only this time, I won't be able to walk away." Isabel stared at him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Then slowly, she stepped forward. "You really think I would go back to him?" she asked, voice steady. "I think people like Daniel don't let go of things they think they own," Liam said. "And I think eventually you'll get tired of fighting him, of fighting all of this." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "That's what this is about? You don't think I can fight for you?" Liam hesitated. "I don't think you should have to." Her jaw clenched, frustration flashing in her eyes. "Liam, do you have any idea how exhausting it is to keep proving to someone that you love them?" His breath caught in his throat. Isabel didn't waver. "I have spent my entire life trying to live up to what people expected of me. I spent years in a marriage where I was nothing more than a piece in someone else's game. And then you came along." Her voice softened, but her gaze remained fierce. "And for the first time, I wasn't someone's trophy. I wasn't someone's business partner. I was just me." Liam swallowed hard, his hands clenching at his sides. "Isabel, no," she interrupted, taking another step closer. "I'm not apologizing for having a past. I'm not apologizing for being someone who had to fight to get where she is. But I will not stand here and let you act like I haven't made my choice." Liam's heart pounded in his chest. She lifted her chin, her voice firm. "You can choose to walk away, but don't ever say I didn't choose you." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Because she was right. She had chosen him. She had sent the letter. She had invited him here. She had stood up to Daniel, not because she needed to prove something, but because she was already done with that chapter of her life. And he was the one running. Liam let out a slow breath, his entire body tense. Isabel watched him carefully, waiting, but she didn't push. She had already said everything she needed to say. After a long moment, Liam took a step forward, then another. When he finally reached her, he lifted a hand, brushing a thumb along her jaw, tilting her face toward him. "You sure about this?" he murmured. She didn't hesitate. "Yes." Liam exhaled sharply, and then he kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just the undeniable, inescapable truth that neither of them was running anymore. The drive out of New York was quiet, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Liam Carter glanced over at Isabel, who sat in the passenger seat of his truck, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. She hadn't questioned him when he asked her to come with him, hadn't hesitated. That alone said more than any words could. It was strange seeing her here, not in designer heels, not in a room full of people who expected something from her. Just Isabel, hair loose, a soft sweater draped over her shoulders, her fingers absently tracing the edge of the window as the skyline of the city disappeared behind them. He had spent so much time believing they were from two different worlds, that no matter what they felt for each other, they would never fit. But maybe love wasn't about fitting. Maybe it was about choosing, and Isabel had chosen him. They drove for hours, the scenery shifting from steel and glass to rolling fields and open sky. The farther they got from New York, the easier Liam felt his chest loosen, like something that had been wound too tight for too long was finally letting go. When they reached his town, the afternoon sun was beginning to dip behind the hills. It wasn't much. A small main street, a handful of local shops, houses spread out over acres of land. A quiet life, the kind most people wouldn't look twice at. But Isabel wasn't most people. She stepped out of the truck, taking in the sight of Carter's auto, the garage that had been in his family for generations. The red and white sign was worn from years of sun and rain, but the place itself was solid. Liam watched her carefully. Not exactly Fifth Avenue. She turned. To him, a soft smile playing at her lips. No, it's better. Something in his chest tightened. Inside, the smell of motor oil and old leather filled the air, the hum of an engine running somewhere in the back. His employees had already gone home for the day, leaving the place empty except for them. Isabel wandered through the space, her fingers grazing the edges of a workbench, the cool metal of a restored engine. "You really love this place," she said quietly. Liam leaned against the doorway, watching her. "Yeah, I do." She turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable. "So why did you invite me here, Liam?" He exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't planned what he was going to say, hadn't thought past the idea of bringing her here, showing her his life. But now, standing in front of her, he knew the answer. "I needed to know if you could see yourself here," he admitted. "Not just for a weekend, not just for a visit." He swallowed hard, the words, feeling heavier than he expected. "For real?" Isabel didn't blink, didn't look away. "You're asking if I could leave my life behind." Liam hesitated. "I'm asking if you want this." Silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, she stepped closer. "I've spent my whole life in places like New York," she said softly. "Boardrooms, business meetings, parties with people I barely know." She exhaled, shaking her head, and for the longest time I thought that's just how it had to be, that it was the only version of happiness I could have. She lifted, her gaze to his, her voice steady. "But then I met you." Liam's breath caught in his chest. "I don't care about New York," she continued. "I don't care about the money or the expectations or any of it. What I care about is you." His jaw tightened. "Isabel." She reached for his hands, threading her fingers through his. "I choose this. I choose you." Liam swallowed. Hard. Something inside him breaking and healing all at once. For the first time, he let himself believe it, and for the first time, he let himself hope. The rain started as a whisper, soft, delicate droplets against the pavement, the scent of earth rising with it. The sky had been overcast all day, heavy with the kind of clouds that threatened a downpour, but the storm never came. Instead, the rain fell in a slow, steady rhythm, gentle enough to be noticed, but not enough to send people running for cover. Liam Carter stood outside Carter's auto, his hands in his pockets, watching the world slow down around him. The small town streets were nearly empty now, most people having retreated to their homes, the glow of porch lights flickering against the early evening haze. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of night that made him believe just for a moment that the rest of the world didn't exist. And then he saw her. Isabel stood across the street, her hair damp from the misty rain, her coat wrapped tightly around her. She hadn't moved, hadn't called his name, hadn't done anything but stand there and look at him like she was trying to memorize him. Liam's breath caught. They had spent the past few days wrapped in something fragile but real, something that had felt too impossible before, but now, standing here, didn't seem impossible at all. Isabel had proven him wrong in every way that mattered. She didn't care about the city, about the wealth, about the world she had left behind. She had chosen him. And now it was time for him to do the same. He stepped off the curb, crossing the street toward her, the rain cooling his skin, dampening his clothes, but he barely noticed. When he reached her, she tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing at her lips. "You're getting wet." "So are you," he murmured. She exhaled a quiet laugh, her hands tucked into the pockets of her coat. "I don't mind." Liam studied her, taking in every detail. Her eyes, the way the rain clung to her lashes, the way her breath curled. In the cool air, he had never been a man of grand gestures, had never cared for big, sweeping declarations, but for her he would do anything. His fingers found the velvet box in his pocket, his heart pounding hard enough that he was sure she could hear it. "I've been thinking about something," he said, voice low. Isabel lifted a brow. "Oh?" He took a slow breath. "Last time I let you walk away." He swallowed hard, his grip tightening around the box. "This time, I won't let that happen." Her lips parted slightly, her breath hitching, but she didn't say a word. Liam dropped to one knee. The rain fell lightly around them, misting the air between them, but he didn't care. He didn't care about anything except the woman standing in front of him, the woman who had turned his world upside down, the woman who had given him something he hadn't even known he needed. He opened the box. The ring was simple. Nothing flashy, nothing extravagant. Just a single diamond set in a band of silver, elegant and timeless. Something that suited her, something that spoke without needing to be loud. Liam's throat tightened. "I don't have the right words for this," he admitted. "I don't know how to promise you forever, because I don't even know what forever looks like. But I know that I love you, and I know that I don't want to spend another day without you." Isabel's eyes shone, her fingers trembling slightly at her sides. "I know I don't belong in your old world," he continued, "but I also know that you belong in mine." He exhaled slowly. "So, if you'll have me, if you'll stay, I want to marry you." The rain blurred between them, the world falling silent except for the sound of their breathing. Then Isabel let out a shaky laugh, a breathless, beautiful sound that sent warmth straight through his chest. "You really think I'd say no?" she whispered. Liam barely had time to react before she was kneeling too, her hands framing his face, pulling him toward her. Their lips met, rain-kissed and breathless, and Liam knew he had finally found home. The morning air was crisp, the kind of autumn coolness that signaled the slow shift toward winter. Isabel Harrington sat on the back porch of Liam's house, a warm mug of coffee between her hands, watching as the mist rolled over the distant hills. It had been 3 days since he had proposed, 3 days since she had said yes, and yet a quiet uncertainty had settled deep in her chest, not because she doubted him, not because she doubted them, but because she had spent her entire life in a world so far removed from this one that she wasn't sure if she could truly leave it behind. She had always thought of herself as adaptable, as someone who could walk into any room, any situation, and adjust. But this was different. The life she had built in New York had been structured, predictable in its own way. There were contracts and schedules, business meetings, and carefully curated relationships. She had known what each day would bring, what was expected of her. But here, in this quiet town with its winding roads and open sky, everything felt uncertain. There was no map, no plan, no blueprint for what her life was supposed to look like now, and maybe, just maybe, that was what scared her the most. She heard the door creak open behind her, felt the warmth of Liam as he stepped onto the porch. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to her, his knee brushing hers, his presence solid and familiar. "You've been quiet," he finally said. She exhaled softly, wrapping her fingers tighter around the mug. "I've been thinking." Liam nodded as if he had expected this. "About what?" She hesitated. "About what it means to stay." The words hung between them, heavier than she intended. Liam's fingers tapped lightly against the wooden railing, his expression unreadable. "You don't have to do this for me, Isabel." She turned to him, frowning. "What? If you're not sure, if you think you'll wake up one day and regret leaving New York behind, I need to know now." His voice was steady, but there was something raw beneath it. "Because I don't want you to choose me just to prove something to yourself. I want you to choose me because you can't imagine not choosing me." Isabel's chest tightened. She set the mug down and turned toward him fully, reaching for his hands. He let her take them, but there was tension in the way his fingers curled against hers. "I spent my whole life making choices that weren't really mine," she said softly. "Choices that were expected of me. Marrying Daniel, running the company, being the woman everyone thought I should be." She swallowed hard. "This is the first time I've ever had a choice that was truly mine." Liam searched her face. "And what do you want, Isabel?" She took a breath, steadying herself. "I want this." She squeezed his hands. "I want you." Liam didn't move for a long moment, as if waiting to see if she would change her mind. Then slowly, the tension in his shoulders eased. "You sure?" he murmured. She smiled. "Yes." Liam exhaled a quiet laugh, shaking his head. "You really are something else, Isabel Harrington." She smirked. "I know." He leaned in, brushing his lips against her forehead, and for the first time in her life, Isabel knew. She wasn't leaving anything behind. She was finally moving forward. The rest of the day passed in a blur of quiet, moments and unspoken decisions. They drove into town, walking through the small shops, past the bakery where Liam always got his coffee, past the bookstore that had been there since before he was born. It was different from what she had known. Quieter, slower, but in a way that felt oddly comforting. She had spent so much of her life rushing, chasing things she hadn't even realized she didn't need. Now, she just wanted to be here, with him. As the afternoon faded into evening, they drove back to his house. The sun was setting, casting golden light over the fields that stretched beyond the property. Isabel leaned against the truck, arms crossed over her chest, watching the horizon. Liam stood next to her, hands in his pockets. "You really staying?" She glanced at him. "I already told you yes," he smirked. "I know, just checking." She nudged his arm. "You better get used to having me around, Carter." His expression softened, something unspoken passing between them. "I think I could live with that." And as the last light of day disappeared behind the hills, Isabel knew she had made the right choice. The morning of their wedding dawned quietly, wrapped in a soft, misty drizzle that clung to the air like a whispered promise. It wasn't a storm, nor was it the kind of relentless downpour that forced people inside. Instead, it was the kind of rain that belonged to them, the kind that had always seemed to find them in the moments that mattered most. Liam Carter stood near the wooden arch that had been set up in the open field behind his house, his hands resting loosely at his sides. The chairs were arranged in neat rows, small bouquets of white flowers tied to the ends. It was nothing grand, nothing extravagant, but it was perfect, because she would be walking toward him. He exhaled, steadying himself, but the second he saw movement in the distance, every thought disappeared. Isabel Harrington stepped onto the path leading to him, and the world tilted. She wore a simple, flowing ivory dress, the kind that moved with her rather than against her. Her hair was down, the soft waves barely touched by the misting rain. She had never looked more beautiful. Liam's chest tightened, his grip unconsciously clenching as she moved closer. Emma walked beside her, carrying a small basket of petals, her grin wide and uncontainable. She had been giddy all morning, thrilled, beyond words, that this was finally happening. As Isabel reached him, the rain kissed her skin, tiny droplets catching in her hair. She met his gaze, something deep and unshaken in her eyes, as if there was nowhere else she had ever belonged more than right here. The officiant began speaking, but Liam barely heard the words. All he knew was her. And then she was slipping her, hands into his, her fingers warm despite the cool air. "You ready for this?" she murmured, a teasing glint in her eyes. Liam smirked, squeezing her hands. "Been ready my whole damn life." She smiled, and then, with nothing but the rain and the soft rustling of leaves around them, they spoke the vows that would bind them together. There were no rehearsed speeches, no perfect words, just promises that belonged to them and no one else. "I never expected this," Isabel whispered. "Never expected you, but you're the best choice I've ever made, and I'll keep making that choice every day." Liam swallowed hard, his voice rough when he spoke. "I don't have the right words for this, Isabel. All I know is that every time I've let you go, it's been a mistake, and I'm not making that mistake again." The officiant smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you." Liam didn't wait for the rest. He pulled Isabel toward him, catching her mouth with his in a kiss that felt like every moment they had ever lost, and every moment they would never have to lose again. Emma squealed with laughter, tossing handfuls of petals into the air, and the small gathering of friends and family cheered. But for Liam and Isabel, there was only them, only this, only forever. When they finally pulled apart, Isabel whispered against his lips, her breath warm despite the rain. "This time," she murmured, "I'm not going anywhere," and Liam knew with absolute certainty that she never would. "We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. We're always amazed by how stories like this bring people together from all over the world. And if you're enjoying this journey with Liam and Isabel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Your support helps keep these heartfelt, inspiring stories coming. Thank you for watching and being a part of this incredible community. We can't wait to share more with you soon.